Hey, what's going on folks? This is Christian, and if you're enjoying the content I'm uploading to the channel, then feel free to subscribe. Also, feel free to offer any suggestions on board games you'd recommend we review. Finally, if you're interested in joining our AOS campaign, then head over to our Discord and become part of the story.
Welcome, Dice Connoisseurs, to War of the Woods, Turn 4, the epic conclusion to our narrative campaign. A big shout out to everyone that's participated so far. This campaign just wouldn't have been possible without your contributions. Without further ado, here is the final conclusions to our campaign.
A foul stench surrounds the once green city of Avalon. The choking smell has wilted the nearby fauna, reducing the place to but a husk of its former self. The city was surrounded by a great rising wall of bramble, the crown of thorns. This was enough to deter any fighting army, but the dead have no care for such defenses. The Alliance members evacuated and retreated as many as they could into its thorned walls in hopes of staving off the invasion of death. Some of the farmlands and villages that occupy the woodlands surrounding Avalon had already felt a chilled touch as legions of undead horrors crept across, stealing the lives and souls of those that could not get away quick enough. The Alliance held off to evacuate these people as best they could, but were eventually overrun. Strutzik, the hunter, had wandered here in hopes of finding his quarry, and would send his haunts tearing through the city if he had to. The dead reached the thorny walls quickly, and began assailing the besieged city. Bridged choke points became desperate battlegrounds as the defenders attempted to diminish the advantage of numbers. Dwarden defenders shouted out loudly as their shields met with armored bone. "Strike shank, strike shank!" They pushed the gaunt skeletons off the bridge and into the rivers below. But as each fell, several more would rush to take its place. The rumble of stamping feet heralded the entrance of voluntary halfling militia forces, using whatever instruments they could find to combat the creeping mass of death. While looking not combat ready, they proved themselves at least helpful in bolstering the numbers of the defending forces. Those more armed took up vantage points to fire pellets down on the siegers, and holding a banner high up to raise the morale of those around them. The hordes of dead soon clamber over the thorn walls of the city. Hundreds of skeletons and zombies impale themselves to create a gore-drenched flesh and bone bridge for others to climb and walk over. But as they enter the city itself, they are trampled and fired upon by blazing pistoliers. As the swarms of undead fell ceaselessly, a warband of Chaos Warriors march over the corpses, led by a bounding demon prince who jumps into the city and begins cutting down defenders as they scatter before him. To meet such formidable foes, a party of stormcasts rushed them to meet in glorious melee. But as the battle ensues, the twisted delusion surrounding them begins to fade away. Praetors with their shining halberds and brilliant Sigmarite armor give way to snarling fangs and leathery hides. Elania and Ella Thor move together in synchronous steps, weaving and swinging, parrying and dodging, and with each maneuver that they do, several more of the undead horde falls. Yet despite their nearly seemingly effortless grace, the enemy numbers never seem to dwindle. The Alliance army musters together every man that they can spare, even enlisting the aid of a Khornate warband. But even with the might of these berserk killers, the odds seem insurmountable. Resting high upon the corpses of hundreds, the vampire lords watch in cold satisfaction as their mindless servants swarm across the city, a sea of screams piercing the stark night air. But rushing through the field of death, a night quester cuts deep with his small hunting party of loyal griffhounds. "Face me, fiends, and no honorable death at the end of my blade." His battle cry and challenge falls on deaf ears as the vampire lords see past his delusion, the insane belief of a crazed ghoul king. One of the vampire lords moved to meet this foe, amused by his derangement. But before the bout even begins, a barrage of silver-tipped bolts tears through the undead commanders, sending them reeling. Aurora Benedicta and Cadmail Quinn launch their sneak attack from a nearby building. Holy stakes are launched at high velocity, impaling another vampire where he stands, and burning through him with purifying holy power. The remaining Night Stalkers close in on the mortals, dodging past bolts and stakes with uncanny skill. Blades lock against gunstocks and crossbows, and it looks as if the brave vampire hunters would be overwhelmed. But between parrying vampiric blades, Cadmail pulls out something from his satchel. A large flask with mercurial fluid that shimmered in the pale moonlight. He smashes it upon the ground, and a purifying wave pushed out as if the voice of Sigmar became manifest. The surrounding vampires felt their souls burn as if held aloft and rebuked by the brightest of Haitian suns. Their strength sapped from them, the vampire hunters were quick to give them their coup de grace. A silvered stake hammered through the heart with vengeful force. As the last of the vampire lords fell, the undead horde slowed in their advance. Freed from their servitude, they became aimless and lethargic. Cadmail smiled briefly, but his grim demeanor returned quickly. The night was still young, and there were still many more undead to slay before dawnbreak. Alliance and Warherd victory. Avalorn is safe. The night air was heavy with the smell of death, yet warm like a fresh breath of new life. The crystalline enigma floated aloft in the Valancourt courtyard, pulsed with magic that seemed unnatural even to the supernatural vampires. It exuded death magic, like a native material from Shaish, yet it pulsed with life, like a great beast from Giran or Gur. Whatever this power was, it was abhorrent to the vampires, perhaps because they too teetered on the edge of living and dead. Natalia, hailing from the kingdom of Kamlan, had spent days in preparation for the ritual ahead. Her servants had marked out the territories held by Lady Valancourt, and the necessary magic circles had been made for miles around. All that was left was to harness the power of the relic and wait. Her ability to manipulate both life and death magic has helped to stabilize the artifact. But with the final incantations nearing, she could feel the trembling of the ground, announcing the approach of the enemy forces. Tharlog Willspeaker holds his banner high to lead the march of the Warherds and the allied forces of Avalorn. He had every intent to lead the Great Herd Mother's forces to victory against the treacherous vampires. Other shamans and beast lords had joined the cause, rallied by the Great Mother's calling, or by their own ambitious will. The artifact radiated with a strong aura of magic, and it had attracted many who would seek to control it, especially those under the service of Tzeentch. Hrolf too marched towards the castle, though not nearly as quickly as he did previously, given the injury he had sustained. Many had suggested that he rest and heal up, but a chance to settle his personal score proved more than enough motivation to keep the hot-headed dwarven moving. Inigo's incarcerants moved alongside him, led by Istarion Havard. The battle mage had had his fair share of encounters with the undead, and he could not let them proceed with whatever this magical conjuring was. As the attackers drew near, they began to pick up the pace, but were quickly slowed down again as threats emerged from all around them. Skeletons began to rise from the ground and poured from hidden mausoleums, summoned by their vampiric masters high within the castle. Several of the castle gates opened to had let loose Black Knights and Blood Knights onto the battlefield, ready to trample any foolish mortal underfoot. But they are not met by mortal fighters, but with shrieking geists and haunts. From across the Strangleweed Sea, the Templars of the Umberspire Inquisition arrive by fleets of ghost ships, wailing alongside the crashing sea waves. An explosion crumbles a section of the castle wall, exposing an entry point for the mortal attackers. Siegfried von Erksdale directed the Aether Tank opening volley, and the Alliance forces soon began a massed sprint towards the castle until great shadows overhead gave them pause. A gout of purple Shaishan flame consumes several retinues of soldiers as a zombie dragon swoops down to devour several more. King Arcturus cuts down the foes around him as a great demon prince crashes to the ground to also begin a merciless rampage. The demon's wings buffet the enemy forces with such strength that soldiers and horses are pushed back. With these two great foes, the entire assault is ground to a halt. It was then that the Alliance forces unleashed the War Hydra that they had bought from the Corsair slavers, hoping that the monstrous creature could turn the tide of battle. Within the courtyard, Natalia's ritual was nearing completion, and she let out a sigh of relief. A great skeletal knight stood watch over her, his vigilance unwavering.
Thank you, Sir Steiger, for staying with me. I feel very safe with you near,
she announced, as if trying to draw conversation from the silent White King. Steiger could feel the rumble of combat near, but would not stray from his duty. He quickly extends his kite shield to deflect an unseen strike, using his skeletal mount to block the assailant and the little necromancer. High Bailiff Kemlek fades into view, his rusted blade still reverberating from the deflection. His hollow hood seemed to call out a familiar name in a whisper, but Steiger ignored it all the same as he pushed his mount forwards to force the haunt away. A flaming bolt darts out towards Natalia, but she dispels it with a quick gesture. Istarion emerges from a fiery blink rift. Seeing the need to bypass the fighting outside, he risks his own life to enter alone. Several skeletons erupt from the ground to bar his path, but he rebukes them with a blast of magical force as Xavier Valancourt emerges from the shadows. Moving with vampiric celerity, he closes in on the battle mage, only to be pushed back by the arcing scythe of Hrolf.
Did you think you could do this on your own, Havard? Let's finish what I started, yeah?
The courtyard quickly became a dueling ground between combatants. Steiger urged his mount forwards to charge at the whirling bailiff, while sparks flash between Hrolf and Xavier. A barrage of spells are flung between the necromancer and battle mage, with quick dispels and counterspells to keep each other in check. But with each passing moment, the magical energies in the air begin to flux more and more intensely as the ritual nears completion.
This is very exciting.
Natalia announces.
You'll all be able to feel the final result, and come with us.
A necrotic bolt of energy launches from her hands towards Astarion, and with a split-second decision, the mage marks a casting circle beneath him as the death magic strikes him, tearing his life force from his body. He stamps his staff onto the ground as the runes begin to glow. Natalia prepares to counter the spell aimed at her, but none materializes. However, a low rumble shakes the ground as the crystal is engulfed in a rising wall of flames, just as the ritual reaches its pinnacle. A devouring darkness emits from the crystal, and reality splits for a brief moment as everything is pulled within. Earth, air, and even light are consumed within this one point, and as if swallowed by a god, the castle and everything surrounding it ceases to exist. Hrolf vomited violently upon the beach, a familiar but still unpleasant sensation racking his tired and injured body. Istarion too felt sick to his stomach, but held his composure, mostly because his body was too weak to vomit. The necromantic energies had sapped away at his life, leaving him weakened not only in his body, but in his soul. Brecken Nielsen, the last truthsayer of Albion, had his back towards the pair, looking on to where the castle once stood, where reality was breached. High Bailiff Kemlet drifted towards the strange anomaly. A gaping void lies in place of the castle, with a floating black orb in the distance, like a dark, unblinking eye.
Does this mean we've won?
Rolf manages to ask between gasping breaths, as a great cheer roars from behind them. The last of the vampiric forces in the field were being dispatched, retreating or flying away, and with no castle in sight, it truly felt that the threat of the coalition of blood was finally vanquished. Xavier tore off his helm to vomit blood upon the ground. A great roar of disgust echoed from another part of the castle. It was likely that Lady Valancourt, and possibly many others, were also feeling the same way. Steiger sat upon his mount silently as ever, perhaps even thankful that he lacked a digestive system. But his mind was more puzzled by what had transpired.
Oh, Lord Xavier, I hope you are alright. Void travel is a bit harsh the first few times. It happens to the best of us.
Natalia tries to comfort the incapacitated vampire lord, but having no consideration for his pride. Above them, the dark moon hovers in the night sky, almost oppressively close to the ground, bathing the lands in an ever-present dusk.
Take some time to compose yourself. We're safe here in the kingdom of Kamlan.
With the vampiric threat seemingly gone, the war herds and alliance begin to part ways, mostly. Though some animosity still remained, their makeshift alliance had strengthened in the face of the vampiric threat. They fought bravely alongside and even aided each other in their time of need. They saw no further need for conflict at the present time. Both sides had suffered greatly, and to continue the war would only mean their own demise. Doomshank Port had become the solidifying ground for their bond. The warherds took back many areas of the settlement, raising their great tents, totems, and encampments once more. While most of the Alliance left the port, some stayed behind to rebuild, finding new roots and allies here, where many had fought valiantly and died bravely. As Mara and her elves left for Avalorn, Sergeant Baltus remained behind to oversee the reconstruction of parts of the port, and also to maintain communications with the Beastmen, having gained respect from both sides of the war through his diplomatic ability and battle experience. Avalorn was damaged extensively in the siege, but as Mara and her followers returned, repairs went underway quickly and with renewed sense of pride. Perhaps this wasn't the doom Mara had envisioned previously, but she guided her people through it nonetheless. The Great Mother retreated back into her forest of eyes, her followers guarding her vigilantly. The herds had taken a great toll in this prolonged war, and it was time to recuperate for now, until her vision stirred once more with the instinct to call her children together once again. The vampires of Valancourt and Lord Conrad find themselves within new territories, with new threats looming. Having accepted a seat at the Round Table Court of King Arcturus, they look towards expanding their hold on the future, already eyeing a rising threat on their borders.
And that will end our first campaign, War of the Woods. To anyone that has listened all the way through, please let me extend my utmost appreciation for your time. I hope this was enjoyable to listen to watch, read, or join in on. If this is something you'd like to see more of, please let us know with a comment down below. I don't think this will be our last campaign, So if you want to catch the next one, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell notification so that you can join us for the next chapter. Thank you to everyone that has gotten involved. You've brought this story to life with your wonderful armies, colorful characters, and great hobbying skills. If you want to get involved with us, please join our Discord channel and just hang out. Until next time though, keep rolling those 6s and let the dice tell the story.